Good night, everyone, and happy independence. Yeah, so good night and happy independence. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you to share a little bit about some of my experiences. And from the invitation that I got from your SRC president, and I acknowledge your SRC president and each one of you present on this occasion. I don't have the benefit of knowing who is there, so I'll acknowledge you all as students and distinguished guests. Um, I will be speaking to you about constitutional awareness. All right. Um, before I speak to you about the Constitution, I just want to share with you a recent publication from the Australian National University and the University of Papua New Guinea. The publication is by the is from the Australian the Public Pacific Affairs Department of the Australian National University, and this is a copy of the book. It's called 50 Years of Nation Making, a Papua New Guinea Dictionary of Biography. 50 Years of Nation Making, a Papua New Guinea Dictionary of Biography. It contains short articles of 50 ordinary Papua New Guineans, teachers, doctors, peacemakers, sports people, musicians, who have in their respective areas contributed to nation making. I will speak to the publishers to see if they can make some copies available to the Divine Word University. The reason why I mention this is because the official government motto for the 50 years independence celebration is called Celebrate Our History, Inspire Our Future. Celebrate our history, inspire our future. And that publication symbolizes very well that motto, because it celebrates people who have contributed in their own respective simple ways the achievements of where we are today. And so as you read through the pages of that book, you remember them and you celebrate their contributions and you appreciate what they've done in contributing to the country. So I want to just say that from the outset before I speak to you, address you on the topic that you invited me to speak to you about. So I want to pose seven questions which I will answer in the 30 minutes that I have to speak to you to see if we can learn something more about the Constitution. So the first question is, what is the Constitution? The second question is, why is the Constitution important? The third question is, how is the Constitution relevant to you? The fourth question, how was the Constitution formed? The fifth question, what are the main features of the Constitution? The sixth question, How is the Constitution applied? And finally, how is the Constitution changed? So I will speak to you about these 7 questions and provide some brief answers to these questions, and hopefully that can uh, create a bit of awareness around the Constitution and inspire you to do your own uh, further readings in this very important aspect of Papua New Guinea's independence and sovereignty. The first question, what is the Constitution? So the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. It's the supreme law of the country. It means that every other law in the country is subject to the Constitution. When we say the Constitution is supreme, it means that every other law is subject to the Constitution. And it means that everyone who lives in that country where the Constitution is supreme must behave in accordance with the Constitution. So the Constitution is the supreme law of the country, and it establishes the framework, the principles, and the powers of government in the Constitution. In a way that is relevant to what we are celebrating, the Constitution, in a very powerful way, is the symbol of Papua New Guinea's independence. It's a symbol of Papua New Guinea's independence. The Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. It was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 15 August 1975. On 15 August 1975, and it came into effect, came into force, meaning it applies now and everyone has to comply with it on 16 September 1975. So you will notice that I said that the Constitution was enacted by the Constituent Assembly and not the National Parliament as you know it now. So why is that? Why is that the Constitution was adopted by a body called the Constituent Assembly and not the National Parliament? So if you can recall from your history classes, the legislative body in the pre-independence entity called Papua and New Guinea was the House of Assembly, And that House of Assembly put into process the independence movement. And when it did that, it established what is called the Constitutional Planning Committee. Constitutional Planning Committee. Now that Constitutional Planning Committee, the chairman of that committee was our founding Prime Minister, Sir Michael Somare. The deputy chairman of that committee was John Momis, then Father John Momis. He was the deputy chairman, but because the Somare was the head of government, the pre-independence body at that time, most of the work was done by the deputy chairman, John Momis. And in that committee was a number of the members of the House of Assembly, and they had that role of proposing to the House of Assembly a constitution that would be enacted for Papua New Guinea's independence. Uh, a number of members of that committee, one name that comes to mind is Sir Paulus Arek as one of them, but the members came from different regions of the country so that that body would be representative of the country. So the House of Assembly established that committee. They went about and did their work. And when they completed their work, they put a proposal to the House of Assembly. And one of the important uh, principle that they wanted the Constitution to reflect was that the Constitution would be homegrown and that it would be something that came from the people themselves and not a legal document that the colonial power drafted and gave to the House of Assembly. And the idea behind that was that it should be homegrown and it would find its authority from the people themselves. So that was why the House of Assembly dissolved itself. It ended its life as the House of Assembly, and then it reconstituted itself as the Constituent Assembly. And it was that legislative body, the Constituent Assembly, that debated and passed the Constitution. And it passed the Constitution on the 15th of August, 1975, to come into force on 16th September, 1975. And so that is why it is called the Constituent Assembly. And when the Constitution came into force on 16th September 1975 at the stroke of midnight, that Constituent Assembly ceased to be known as the Constituent Assembly and it became known as the National Parliament of Papua New Guinea. The first general elections were in 1977 under the independent state of Papua New Guinea. So the members of the Constituent Assembly from 1975 to 1970, the members of the National Parliament from 1975 to 1977 were actually the members of the House of Assembly, come Constituent Assembly, and at Independence National Parliament. So they were just transitioning, and the first ever national general elections of the independent state of Papua New Guinea took place in 1977. So the question, what is the Constitution? It's the supreme law of the country, and it sets out the different powers and functions of the country. And one very important idea behind the Constitution is that it should not only be a legal document that is concerned with powers and functions of the different arms and branches of government, but it should also be a roadmap. It should also be a roadmap. It should also be a signpost. It should show where the country is going towards, where it's going to. And that is incorporated in what is called the National Goals and Directive Principles and Basic Social Obligations. So the question, why is the Constitution important? It is important because it is the symbol of Papua New Guinea's sovereignty. It is important because it defines our identity. It shows who we are. It is important because it unites us as people of different tribes or different languages. It is important because it is the framework that governs the relationship between the different arms of government, and it sets the boundaries upon which government is to act, and it protects the rights of citizens. So that is why the Constitution is important. It's a symbol of our identity, our sovereignty. It unites us together as a people. It sets the boundaries upon which government is to act, and it protects our rights as citizens. And as I said earlier, it provides a roadmap of where the country is to go towards. So, for example, it talks about integral human development. The development must be development of the person, and it's not only economic development. There should be equality amongst all citizens. There should be sovereignty, and we should respect our environment, and that uh, our customs, our cultures play a very important role and must not be ignored. So that is the idea that as I said, that the Constitution provides a roadmap. So this is why the Constitution is important. The next question, how was the Constitution formed? How was the Constitution formed? Now, I answered that question um, briefly when I started to speak about what is the Constitution and why is the Constitution important. And so when Papua New Guinea became a colonial entity of Australia, as you know, the northern part of Papua New Guinea was under uh, German administration, New Guinea, and the southern part, Papua, came under the British. And the British handed over their administration to the Australians. And after the end of the First World War, the League of Nations gave the mandate to Australia. The League of Nations is the precursor to the current United Nations. It gave the mandate to Australia to administer the territory of New Guinea. So that is why it is Papua was part of was a colony of Australia, and Germany was a trust territory of the League of Nations administered by uh, Australia. So that is why before independence, Papua New Guinea was known as Papua and New Guinea. Anyway, they decided that that entity of Papua and New Guinea should become independent, and it put in place the process of the, Papua and New Guinea becoming independent, and it established a legislature, and that was the eventually setting up of the House of Assembly, I think in 1964. So the House of Assembly proceeded on, and then the question of independence became strongly. And under the Labour government of Australia, under Gough Whitlam, the process quickened its pace. And then the House of Assembly resolved to establish a committee of the House of Assembly, more or less like a parliamentary committee. And that committee was called the Constitutional Planning Committee. And it was established in 1974, I believe. Sorry, 1972. In 1972, and the House of Assembly gave some specific terms of reference to the Constitutional Planning Committee. As I said, the deputy chair was John Momis, and the terms of reference was for them to propose a homegrown constitution, that is a very central idea behind the Constitution, that it would be homegrown. And so how will that committee realize the requirement that the Constitution would be homegrown? It thought that the best thing in order for them to realize that, they have to uh, consult the people, and there has to be wide consultation, and the people themselves must tell committee what sort of law they want the country to have. And so the Constitutional Planning Committee undertook wide consultations around the country. They uh, developed what was discussion papers, and they, based on the discussion papers, the consultations took place, and they received over 2,000 submissions right across the country on the various questions that they raise, And so the Constitutional Planning Committee put together a report and submitted that report to the House of Assembly. That report is called the Constitutional Planning Committee Final Report 1974. In short, we call it the CPC Final Report. And the CPC Final Report is a very important document when you're trying to understand and interpret the Constitution. That document can be accessed online, and you can find it from the website called www.packley.org. When you get on that website, you will see the different countries in the Pacific, and you click on Papua New Guinea, and it will show you that particular link there on the Constitutional Planning Committee Final Report, and you can go in there and read for yourselves the different recommendations that they made on the type of constitution Papua New Guinea should have. And that report was brought before the House of Assembly. Now, let me say a little bit about the Constitutional Planning Committee Final Report. The Constitutional Planning Committee had some very strong views. For example, they proposed this. They thought that the national goals and directive principles and basic social obligations should play a central role in the country's future. And it should guide the interpretation of laws, the policy decisions, new laws that are being enacted. They must all be guided by the national goals and directive principles and basic social obligations. And the CPC thought that in order for the national goals and directive principles and basic social obligations to be achieved, what was very important was the quality of leadership. The quality of leadership. If there is anything that can change the country, that can move the country, that can address the social issues that the country has, it's the quality of leadership. The quality of leadership. And they use this very powerful metaphor to emphasize the point about quality of leadership. They said, before somebody gets on a car and travels to where they want to go, they must know where they are going. If they don't know where they're going, they will be going all over the place, and they will be confused and disorientated. So before you get on the car, you must know where you're going. And so that is why they recommended the national goals and directive principles and basic social obligations to be the signpost of where the country is going. And they thought that in order for the country to know where it's going, it must have good leaders. And the mechanism that they put in place for the uh, country to have good leaders was the Ombudsman Commission, the Ombudsman Commission. And so that is found in the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly adopted that proposal for the Ombudsman Commission. And the role of the Ombudsman Commission is to supervise and enforce the leadership code. The leadership code is a standard of conduct that's expected of leaders. And where leaders fail to meet that standard, then they would be said to have committed misconduct in office, and they will be prosecuted before the leadership tribunal. And issues such as misappropriation of funds, bribery, uh, not following the law are some areas where leaders can get into trouble with the Ombudsman Commission and be found to have committed misconduct. So that was one of the proposal of the CPC, which the Constituent Assembly took up. Some other proposals of the CPC that the Constituent Assembly did not accept was, for example, the provincial government system. The other main idea behind the Constitution was that of power sharing. People who were at the people who are most affected by decisions should be the ones that make decisions to affect them. And so that's why you have in Papua New Guinea the three levels of government: the national government, the provincial government, and the local level government. And now, in recent times, I think in 2014, the districts came in not by constitutional amendment, but by through an act of parliament. And so now you have somewhat four levels of government. So in between the province and the local level government, you have the districts. But the Constitution had the idea that those who are most affected by decision of government should be the ones that makes the decision. And so one of the recommendations in the CPC report was the provincial government system. That proposal was not taken up by government when it enacted the Constitution on the 15th of August, 1975. It decided to do away with that recommendation because the CPC was a committee of the House of Assembly, and it was tasked to put together a constitution and provide its report, and that was what it did. And the Constitutional Assembly was at liberty to either accept or reject the proposals. And so they rejected the provincial government system. And so why do you have it now? Well, Bougainville pushed for independence. And so that in order to appease Bougainville, the government, in its very first amendment of the Constitution in 1976, introduced the provincial government system following the proposal of the CPC. But initially, it was not accepted by the Constituent Assembly. Another interesting example of the Constituent Assembly not accepting the proposal of the CPC was the head of the English monarch to be for the English monarch to be the head of state of Papua New Guinea. So the CPC thought that Papua New Guinea, with this idea of being homegrown and the people themselves were the masters of their own destiny, they are the source of the law, the source of the Constitution. So the idea of having someone from another country being the head of state was foreign to them. It did not resonate with that idea of being independent and sovereign. So they said, we acknowledge our colonial links with the Commonwealth. And unlike Australia and New Zealand, the English monarch will not be the head of state of Papua New Guinea, but we will still remain as part of the Commonwealth, as part of the Commonwealth, as part of those countries who have colonial links uh, to the United Kingdom. We'll still be part of them. We'll whatever values and principles they stand for, we will also stand with them, and we'll also be part of that community of nations. But to have the English monarch as the head of state, represented by the Governor General, is not something that Papua New Guinea should have. Well, that proposal was rejected by the Constituent Assembly, and so now when the Constitution was enacted on 15 August 1975, the English monarch is now the head of state of Papua New Guinea. So before that was Queen Elizabeth II, and now it's King Charles. I think it's King Charles VI, King Charles, formerly Prince Charles. He is now the head of state of Papua New Guinea, represented by the Governor General. So those are the two, I guess, key proposals of the CPC that were not accepted by the Constituent Assembly. Most of the other principles, most of the other recommendations and the rationale behind them were accepted and on the adopted on the 15th of August 1975 and came into force on the 16th of September. So that's in a very few words how the Constitution was formed. So it came about from wide consultation, and it was said it had to be homegrown and it was to be from the people themselves. The next question is, what are the main features of the Constitution?